So, thank you so much for coming out here. We have a really, really exciting talk for everyone. This is an idea that has been in the works for a long time. Unfortunately, I get to introduce our guest speaker because Sasha's Uber's been pulled over by the police. So, but anyway, I feel like I can do it. We have an amazing special guest with us, Professor Chahan, who knows a lot more about this subject than I do, and will give you a huge wealth of information based on his scientific knowledge. So I want to welcome Professor Chahan, and also while we do the talk as well, just want to remind you there's food over here, there's drinks at the bar. Make yourself nice and comfortable and enjoy the night. Enjoy the night.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Chahan, and thank you for introduction. So yeah, I'm standing here up high, talking from distance, but I hope everybody hears me, sees me. And yeah, we're here to talk about the concept of extract chilling, which is really in the works since about many years. What I'd like to do today is not just explain the concept of extract chilling, but let's explain also how we came here, because when you do research, when you work on a concept, you're not going straight to the solution. We had actually some trajectory until we find out and we did the research. And so, really where our work started was in 2017, and in 2017 there was actually a change in the rules where at the Barista Championship you could actually change the temperature of the extraction water. So initially, our research on what is the impact of the extraction water on cup quality. And that was in 2017. We wanted to know what is the impact of the water that we use for extraction, and how can a barista use that and take advantage in order to improve his cup. So basically what we did at the time, we started with several coffee machines and did a whole range of chemical analysis to find out whether the extraction water, the water coming in to extract, was affecting the coffee. So this was the initial research. And we screened the range from 90 to 96 degrees Celsius in order to understand this and in order to enable the baristas to profit from that and to improve the cup quality. And we took specific coffee, so you see here all the parameters that we used. Now, before we embark into research, we always want to be sure that what we're doing has some impact on the cup. So the research really started with some central evaluation, and as you see, we did here three profiles, three extractions, 90, 93, 96 degree. And what you see here, the interesting fact is that yes, there are sensory differences. People knew that, and what we see here, something that has to be kept in mind, is that the extract with the coldest extraction water seems to be the most intense, kind of the best. The only attribute that was weaker with the 90 degree in this particular coffee and with this machine was the bitterness. So yes, extraction water has an impact on your cup quality, and we see that the colder water, or the 90 degree water, seemed to be actually a little bit superior. But now the question was, what is the reason behind this phenomenon? And here is what we see. It's an increase in many attributes and a decrease in the bitterness. And if you go into statistics, you can say that the difference between 90 and 96 is really, for many of these attributes, is significant. It's a strong, significant difference. And even between 90 and 93, there are some attributes with significantly difference. This is essentially what we do. We have to be sure that these differences are not just by chance. There were real significant differences if you extract the coffee with different water temperatures. But now the question is, how can we explain that, and how can we take advantage of that? Now the third thing we did, in a, I would say perhaps a little bit naive way, is because we looked into the non-volatiles and the compounds that are in the cup, but they are not contributing to the smell. This is a little bit what you do when you look into extraction. because when you look at the coffee brewing chart only is based on non-volatiles, basically on TDS and all these compounds that are non-volatiles. But as you see, we did 2 different brew ratios, 3 different temperatures, and here I'm just showing now the extraction yield. There is really no difference. These differences are not at all, can never be at the origin of the sensory differences. And the question is why we don't see any difference, or where is the difference? Where is the difference that makes really the aroma or the flavor of the coffee so different? Now what we did next is we looked at the extraction. We still focused on the non-volatiles, and what we're seeing here is we measured the yield as a function of the volume of the extract. We went to what we call exhaustive extraction. We tried to extract until the limit to find out how much can you actually extract in a coffee. And what you see, the line here, the dotted line, is double espresso to 50 milliliter. And you see that at 50 milliliter, you already have extracted 81% of what you can actually extract if you go into exhaustive extraction. Basically, what it means is when you look at non-volatiles, and you look into, for example, the TDS or into the extraction yield, with 50 milliliter, you already have extracted 80% of what can be extracted compared to an exhaustive extraction. It means you extract with 500 milliliter or more, you get only 20% more. I'll tell you what that means. Basically, that means, and I'll show you a little bit more data, is that if with 50 milliliter you already extracted 80% of what you can extract, then a little bit change in difference cannot have that much impact because there's not so much more to extract. So in a way, the temperature on this compound that contribute to the yield will not have an effect because you are already so efficient. And we looked also into the individual compounds because the extraction yield can be separated like a prism into the different compounds that contribute to it. One is, for example, caffeine. The caffeine is already extracted to 84% with 50 milliliter compared to the exhaustive extraction. So you really have most of it out, and you can look into many different compounds. Chlorogenic acids, you have 80%. Other bigger compounds. Basically, when you look at this, you see that we are extracting between 70 and 80% already with 50 milliliter. So the non-volatiles are actually extracted very efficiently in an espresso. And here, just a summary, you see that most compounds that contribute to the TDS or to the yield are extracted by 70 to 85% already with 50 milliliter, and adding a little bit now fluctuation temperature has basically zero impact on these compounds. So the temperature of the extraction doesn't really make a big difference on the non-volatiles. And we did the same thing also for different temperatures with a different extract on a different machine. Here with the Black Eagle, just to show that it's not dependent on the machine. We went to a totally different machine. The phenomenon was exactly the same. It's not dependent on the coffee machine. You see here again, extraction yield is 81%, and you see the temperature effect, the same amount of extraction. The extraction yield will, in this case, will never go over 25%. Even if you extract with 500 milliliter your coffee, you will not be able to extract more than 25% in an espresso machine. If you boil, you can go to 30%, but that's the maximum you can extract. And here, the chlorogenic acids, other compounds, ferulic acid, just other compounds that are extracted. And you see that just the temperature has no effect on these compounds, or very little effect. Now here, for the extraction yield, if you extract exhaustively with 500 milliliter, you can go to 25%, but with 50 milliliter, you're already 20% extraction yield, and temperature does not really has an impact on that. In percentage, on the yield now, of the compounds, you see you're around 80%. So, we have a phenomena using different temperatures. We have different flavor profiles, but it is not in the non-volatiles that we will find the answer. The reason for the differences must be somewhere else. Now, we see sensory differences, but we don't know where it's coming from. And now we did another experiment, which is, we looked at the volatiles, the compounds that are contributing to the smell of the coffee, and not to the things that are dissolved in the cup. And what are you looking here at? You see here, we looked at the volatiles, which is above the cup. We're looking at the compounds that are released by the cup by a specific technique, which we call headspace gas chromatography. And we look at the compounds for a cup that has been extracted, the red at 96 and the blue at 90 degrees Celsius. And what we see here is that systematically a cup that has been extracted at lower temperature has more aroma compounds above the cup. So in a way you would say, if you extract warm, you should have more, so you should smell more. But the observation, a little bit like in the sensory case, if you extract with colder temperature, you have actually more intensity in the cup, and we have more volatiles above the cup. And so this actually triggered something in my head, and because I remembered what Bert Wood did from Taiwan in 1916 at World Barista Championship, where he became world champion. And I guess some people might remember what he did. He cooled his portafilter, and he had a strong aroma. And so cooling gives more. It's kind of weird to say, he cools his portafilter, and you get actually a gained intensity. And this has nothing to do with extraction, because we looked at the extraction, we didn't feel like changing the temperature of the extraction water is changing the way you extract. So, and this is what Bert Wood did, he poured cold water on his portafilter before he extracted, and then extracted with his portafilter, and he got an aroma that was significantly stronger, and he became world champion with this technology. Part of the story was that. That's at least also what he says. So what is happening here? What is happening really? And that's where, with all these results, we started to think. And before I'll come now to the next step, the story, basically, that's where we started to talk to Sasha and share with him the things that we learned, and with Hugh Kelly. Before going into that, there's a second element that we have to know in the science of extraction that will also be part of extraction. So we know that it's not extraction, it is something after extraction that is affecting the richer aroma. And in order to implement extraction, I just want to show you another phenomenon. Here is a little bit a complex experiment. This is actually a capsule system I'm showing here. We did the same thing also with professional machines. The coffee is coming out here. That's the spout of the single serve capsule. And here we have a system that is basically sniffing. It's a nose. It is sniffing on the coffee that is flowing down, and we're measuring how much aroma is in the flow. And what we see, a phenomenon that you actually all know, if you look at the intensity of different compounds, we can look at hundreds of compounds here, 90 compounds as a function of extraction time, and the time is more or less the same as milliliter or gram. You see that the intensity of the compounds are all within the first 10 seconds. So if you extract, your initial few milliliters are full of aroma, and then the second part of the extract, after 10 seconds, is kind of only diluting your coffee. I'm exaggerating, but most of the aroma is coming very early on. That's where the extract is very rich. And then the rest of the extraction is, in a way, there's still things coming, but the content of the aroma is very low. Here is the same picture looking from the top, and the red point is always the maximum of the intensity for this 95 compounds. You see that most of these compounds reach a maximum in their intensity or concentration in the extract that is before 10 seconds. So really, most of the aroma in your extraction is coming in the first 5 to 10 seconds, and after that, you have still, of course, a little bit aroma coming, but it's very little. And that's the second element of the extract chilling. So you see some compounds are coming later, but it's just a small group. And now that's where we come to the concept of extract chilling. We know somehow if you extract with different temperatures, you have different flavor profiles, and you know that most aroma comes early. And now I'll just go back to the story how everything happened. You know, in 1918, we started to collaborate with Sasha and his team, Hugh Kelly, on the OCD at the time. So we had research that we were doing on the OCD with all kind. He came to Switzerland, and he really worked in our lab at the time with his son, and we did all kind of experiments in the lab, a lot of tasters, and has nothing to do with extract chilling, but that's where we built our relationship. And at some point, based on doing research, I started to talk to Sasha and sharing with him these ideas. You know, we have this phenomena, it has a big impact on the flavor. It's not to do with extraction water. And then we discussed it with Hugh Kelly, and we realized that what's happening is really after extraction. It is actually the extract that is coming out of the spout that, depending on the temperature, is actually losing a lot of aroma. So we're not focusing anymore on the extraction itself, but on what's happening after extraction. The extract after extraction is losing aroma. And so what we have to do is to preserve, to retain this aroma after extraction. And that's where the concept of extract chilling was born. And that's where also Hugh started to think about it and worked on ways to check that, because at the time it was just a hypothesis. It was a hypothesis. Do you hear me? Yeah. It was a hypothesis that we weren't really sure whether it's true. So that's when Sasha and Hugh Kelly just took the idea over and tested it. They tested for 2 weeks, and suddenly they came back and said, it really works very good, it makes a huge difference. And here he was using the ice rock, was using where is it? Here, that's the way it was initially tried, an ice rock, which was cooled, and the flow was going over this tube, cooled down, and with ice rock, he gained much more intensity. And that's where we said, okay, let's try to test it in the lab. And we also tried to cool the spout, which is a little bit more difficult because you have to cool it in the freezer or in the very cold, and then you take it in your hands, you screw it on it. While you do that, it's warming up. It needs a little bit of different setup. But essentially, this was then the solution, and we said, let's test it. Is that really going to work? So if we cool it after extraction, and we don't impact extraction at all, only cool it, is that going to give more aroma? And that was then the idea that we followed together. And we tried 2 different coffees, which were the coffees. One was Hugh's competition coffee for the World Barista Championship in Milan, the Originides. And the other one was just a coffee that was, you can call it like a general coffee that should also work. So we tested 2 different coffees, not just a very rare competition coffee. And here are the results. What you see here is the dotted red line is an extraction without chilling. That's what we were doing always. And we put intensity for a large number of compounds, I don't know, 50 compounds we measured. And the intensity of the compound without chilling is put at 100%. And then we did different type of extract chilling. We cooled only the first 5 gram, or in fact, more or less the first 5 seconds, and then took the ice rock out. Or we cooled the first 12 grams or the flow 12 grams. So we try to cool different fractions because we know that only the initial part of extract is really relevant. After that, you don't have to cool. And in one case, we also did the frozen spout. And what you see immediately is, yes, as soon as you cool it, the intensity of the compounds jump up, and by 5, 10, 15% for some compounds, and depending, you can also go up to 40%. So, yeah, so the cooling, and this is a technique. We use different techniques now. This is a technique, you don't know what it is. It is measuring the intensity of the compounds above the cup. How much is there, and in relation to the non-cooled situation. If you put it in percentage, in total, it doesn't look like a lot, 7%, 10, 11%. That's the total increase in the volatiles. But if you look at specific compounds, some compounds are significantly more. So there are some selective compounds that increase by 30, 40%. And so selectively, you will have compounds that are increased or retained due to the cooling. Here we use another technique which is a little bit less sensitive, but where we are also used a lot, and we know exactly which compounds this is. And what you see here, the compounds early on in this chromatogram, as we call it, are the more volatile compounds. And if you go to longer times, basically this is a time in the way we analyze, then the compounds are becoming less and less volatile. And what you see is that the compounds that are the most volatile seem to be increased selectively. And compounds that are later, that are less volatile, are less affected by the concept of extract chilling. They are more or less at the same level as the reference that is not cooled. So this is a second technique, a very different technique of measuring the volatiles, and we see the same phenomenon. It's a little bit less sensitive, but it's good to check it with different techniques. And we see that, and this is for the Ethiopian washed. Now, we tried with a second coffee, exactly the same phenomena, systematic increase, depending on the three conditions that we have. The same phenomena, cooling increases the intensity of the compounds above the cup. Here the percentage is a little bit different. It really depends on the coffee, and there's still a lot of work to be done. And also, if you do the gas chromatography, you see that the early compounds are selectively increased compared to the compounds that are coming later. This is the basis of extract chilling. Cooling the extract after extraction is going to make a huge difference, and you only have to cool a few grams or a few seconds. You don't have to cool more than 5 grams. Of course, the advantage of that is that you're not really cooling your coffee, because you can pull out the ice rock and your extract is then cooled normal.
I'll swap your microphone. Sit up.
And you will have really more or less the same effect, even if we cool very little. The phenomena is because you really have most of the volatiles very early on in your coffee. So, and that's where Hugh Kelly then went with that to the World Championship. He came all the way to the finals and became third. So I'm sure part of the success of this research is also because he was driving it to his routine and to his competition. And we really pushed it to understand it for his competition coffee, but also with other coffees. And that was for us really the first proof and the strong proof that this is working. And so what we did very recently, we had in Switzerland an event called Sensory Summit, that you have also in the US. And at this event, together with Amy and Mathieu from Mame Coffee in Switzerland, I guess some people know them, they are here, I don't know where. I said, let's present it. For the first time, we decided to present it at the event. And I called up Mathieu and Amy and asked, do you know about this? I said, yes, we know, we do it actually, and it works. And so I asked Mathieu and Amy to come to the Sensory Summit and to prepare the coffee so that we can all taste it. I gave a presentation a little bit like today, and then we had an event where everybody, more than 100 people, could taste it. And here we use the coffee from their own production from Mame Coffee. And here they are preparing it, and they actually prepared in 20 minutes more than 2 times 100 espresso, one chilled and one non-chilled. And that was given to the people to taste it blind. And they had to evaluate based on a range of attributes how they perceived the difference. And the way they cooled it is that they put the portafilter into ice so that only the spout was touching the ice and not the whole portafilter. This was a little bit also based on the experience and observation also by Mathieu, that if you put the whole portafilter into it, it actually affects also the extraction, because the whole portafilter, if it cools, it changes extraction time, but we don't want to affect all the extraction, we only want to affect after extraction, cooling of the extract. That's why only the portafilter was in ice. It wasn't really that cold, so the effect was really small, but that was the experiment, and then every person at the Synergy Summit got 2 cups, and they didn't know which one was what, and they had to compare, the peer comparison, which one is sweeter, more acidic, more bitter, the one or the 2. One was non-chilled and 2 was chilled, and at the end we had nearly 80 people who gave evaluation back. And these were the results from the people. So acidity, at least for this coffee, we don't want to generalize for all coffees, and for all extractions, but here clearly there was a very strong difference on the acidity, with nearly 90 people, some increase in the sweetness, some increase even in texture. You would say texture is not something that is in the volatiles, but it can be actually influencing your perception from the volatiles, and then very little also in the aroma. And the bitterness was decreased. So that was actually the statistical results from the study at the Synergy Summit, based on this particular coffee and the extraction. This was a Synergy result on that. So it works on the espresso. And we went through all that, with you at the World Championship in Milan, where he was third, and made fantastic results. Now, of course, in the background, Sasha very intensely working on it with us, really exploring and pushing this idea further. As you probably know, he really became so engaged with the idea that said, I'm going back to competition. And so we, together, started now to explore the whole concept for filtered coffee. It should actually work just as well for filtered coffee. It might be different, and we made an experiment, and we just, in the beginning, it's exploring whether it works for the filtered coffee as well. So we did the same experiment for the filtered coffee, and as I said, it should not affect the non-volatiles. The extract chilling should not have an impact on the extraction process itself. It's only on the retention of the high volatiles. So if you look here for the filtered coffee, and we use a setup that is very similar that we're going to just show later for Paragon, but it was like a little bit an improvised version initially. On the non-volatiles, and the scale is really very small, so it looks like there is an error bar. It's really nothing. It's very reproducible. And there is nothing on TDS and extraction yield between the chilled and the non-chilled. So it doesn't really affect the non-volatiles. But if you go on the volatiles, we see here, if you look overall, we see an effect that overall there's an increase. Of course, you have to realize when you work on filtered coffee, your coffee is so much more diluted that our analytical techniques are a little bit struggling with the signal intensity. On espresso, we have such a strong signal that we have much more significance and less variability. But overall, you clearly see that the intensity is increased by about 4 to 5% in this case. It's smaller, but you have to realize that filter coffee is so much more dilute. And in my feeling, that a small difference in filter coffee can have a much stronger impact on the sensory than it will have in espresso, where the flavor or the aroma and the taste is so overwhelming that a small difference might not be perceived. So this is, in a percentage perspective, a little bit smaller, but it is an increase, and we see the same phenomena, and we are really at the beginning. We still have to optimize. We work with a simple setup, but extract chilling works for filter coffee. And here are also some sensory data that were done here in the group of Sasha. And you see that the gray bar is the area which is the standard deviation between the red line, the red line is the non-chilled, and whatever is above the gray zone is a significant difference in some sensory attribute. And you see that at 50-60 degree tasting, there are several attributes in the sensor that are significantly increased in this, or significantly different. And if you cool it down, you actually observe an increase in the significance difference between the non-chilled and the chilled. So you have the same phenomena in the filter coffee, and from a sensory perspective, it is not smaller. From a signal intensity, it's a little bit smaller, but that's because your filter coffee is more dilute. And that's where the concept of Paragon was developed. How can we create a setup that takes advantage of this phenomena in a systematic way and can allow to chill the extract? And this is the setup. I see one standing there, where you have here the filter, and here you have the chilled ball, and it flows over the ball and into the carafe, and so you can extract, and you can take this out after a few milliliters, just as you want. And as you probably know, Sasha competed, here typical picture where he competed with the Paragon setup and really demonstrated, and people know the story, I'm sure, that what happened at the championship in Australia. The coffee was so astonishingly different than what other did that jury didn't even believe it can work. Okay, so that's it. So I'm not sure how we'll do it, whether we'll have a discussion here, we'll have a discussion in the group, but I hope now it's also up to the whole community to test. We are really at the beginning of it, you know. We test a few things. I'm sure we can optimize and we can really tickle out the whole phenomena. So I'm not sure how do it, you Kelly or Sasha, do we have a discussion here, questions, or do we do it just in the group?
Please do a quick Q&A, I think.
Quick Q&A, yeah, we take like a few questions.
Absolutely. I can run around.
Right. So, thank you, Chahan. That was amazing. I know a lot of technical information, a lot of questions. If we've got any questions in the crowd, stick your hand up. We can hopefully get some answers for you. Otherwise, we can mingle after and have a chat about that as well. So, is there any questions from the talk?
Have you considered the commercial applications of the chilling extraction for espresso in a cafe? Is that something that you would need for specific types of coffee, or would you consider trying to apply it as well?
I can give half of the answer. I'm sure Sasha can give more, but really, we know this phenomenon since so long on espresso, and we were waiting and still waiting for the commercial realization of it. There is work going on in the background. But, so we know that since more than a year, but since Sasha and ONA really pushed forward on the filter coffee, and now we have a setup, we said we're gonna go out. And I think there are things in preparation for the espresso. I don't want to tell you more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so for espresso coffee, I mean, you are roasting differently. It's a very different style of brew, and as we know, espresso is extremely difficult to get right. So I guess before we release anything, before we present data, we want to be absolutely sure that the results are the results. With filter coffee, it was, I mean, Sasha did thousands of side-by-side cups. Like every time I walk past his office, he's like, and I think he did that to everyone around him for 6 months, and it was very, very, very clear. But with espresso, you've got different roasting styles, which can slightly affect it. So we just want to be sure that we're putting the right message out before, any future release. Hopefully that answers your question. In the back.
So you have the data on what an optimum sort of range of chill is? Maybe I didn't hear it. What the temperature is
Yes. So we tried actually the spout or the ice rock was frozen, so we put it minus 20 degree, and then it was put below into the extract. And we tried 3 different times, 5 gram, 12 gram, and 20 gram for the espresso. Whereas for the filter coffee, it was for the first 50 grams. Is that right?
To 20% of the extraction.
20% of the extraction was cooled, approximately. So we didn't actually play around with that. It was based on Sasha's experience that we tried one time for cooling the filter extract. There are many parameters. I think it will depend on the coffee. It will depend on other parameters. So we didn't explore the whole range in filter, but we did what Sasha found out as a very good setting. That's right, Sasha.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you jump up.
You can come through this side, Sash. Okay. I want to go through there.
Nice to see you, first of all.
Hi, Sash.
Yeah, so what we found with the filter coffee especially, first of all, why we find bigger sensory differences. Normally when we roast filter coffee compared with the espresso, we usually would roast that coffee a little bit faster, a little bit lighter. Which means we have more natural aroma volatiles available for us to sort of see. But we did find that not only difference in aroma volatiles, aromas or flavors, we found significant difference in how we perceive the coffee, which, texture, balance, aftertaste, etc. And I guess the main thing is, after we've done a lot of studies, is that when we chill extract, entire extraction, so maybe entire 300 grams out, we did find that we're getting more flavors, more aromas, but we also are decreasing certain elements about a coffee. And so we found that, after discussing with you, that the majority of aroma volatiles we extract is in first stage of the extraction, first 20 to 30%. And we found that with that, technique, whether we're doing 40-60 method, the first 2 pours we extract by using the rocks, but the last 3 pours we extract without the rocks. We managed to sort of increase aromas and flavors and not necessarily decrease other elements like a texture, etc. We highly encourage everyone to experiment and play with it, but maybe if you keep in mind the roast profile, because as Kelly mentioned, when we do have some darker roast profiles in the espresso, there's not much difference. We believe that's because there's not many. Some of these aroma volatiles are way below threshold, so even chilling work doesn't really help as much. When we were experimenting with it, try to stick with whether it's espresso or filter coffee, or 20 to 30% of extraction. For Hugh coffees, Kelly's coffee in WBC, 12 grams was best timing that we found. First 12 grams of the espresso, and some of the coffees have been experimenting. First 100 grams we will chill, but the other 200 grams we actually do not chill. That's a bit of an extended version.
Yes, and the reason why a light roast will be more efficient is when you roast dark, you are basically boiling off the volatiles. You're just heating the stuff. You're generating the first part, and then you just lose it in the second part of your roast, so that's why you will have less of the really high volatiles in a dark roast. And that's why probably extract chilling will be less efficient. Yeah, so now everybody has to explore it because there is some data, but there is much more to be tried. Yeah, please.
I wanted to ask if the material of the bowl and the size is suitable and how long you freeze it in the freezer, does it affecting the brew and are they related with the elements?
Yeah, great question. We've experimented, again for filter particularly, with a lot of different size balls or rocks. And the reason we've obviously gone for that round shape is it's because it not only it shocks the temperature by having minus 20 degrees, as Professor mentioned. We found the range minus 20 is okay. We did not really find more significant difference in sensory if it's minus 30 or minus 40, if coffee is on dry ice as an example. So we were happy with that amount. But initially we did work with the smaller rocks, and we found that as we extract filter coffee between 50 to 100 grams, the temperature of the rock decreased a lot, and we did not have as good results as, for example, with this rock that we have now. And the shape really helps as well because it really helps to disperse the liquid over the rock rather than just have one bigger channel, and it really makes it really nice and thin and mellow. And so not only the temperature sort of helps to cool it down, but also the shape, which is the conversation we had a long time ago in Switzerland, and that Professor really inspired me how FlavorTech, which is a company based in Australia, how they work with instant coffee and the techniques that they are doing with the instant to maintain more aroma volatiles. Some of our early conversations started with, let's actually see how we can, try to use also the shape to improve it. But it's a continuous thing. In the future, we are looking with different shapes as well. We test and see how we can improve it further.
Yes, part of discussion was also to avoid turbulences. You want to have a flow that goes smooth over your bowl and not create huge turbulence with your extract, because this could eventually increase the loss of aroma. So the shape is probably very good. But definitely there is still a lot to explore. The field is huge, we're just entering it.
All right.
I've got a question. So the volatiles in the headspace are going to change over time. So how do you standardize the cleaning time after brewing when you did the mass step? And for how long is the difference between chilled and not chilled accepted? Like after brewing?
Yes. So when we extract, we immediately cool down the coffee down there in order to keep it. So we are trying to stabilize the extract itself. And then I show you different techniques, whatever. So we try to measure it more or less very early on after extraction, really shortly after extraction. And I don't want to go into techniques, but we kind of really get the picture shortly after extraction for different cooling conditions. I don't know if that's enough. I can give you more detail about GC, how we do, or by the art techniques, how we capture the coffee, how we store it, how we measure it.
Well, I guess the follow-up question is sort of more, perhaps it's more for you, Sasha. Like when you're drinking it and as you're experiencing it, do you get to a point in time where if you have the two side by side, they become similarly aromatic? Or do you think that the paradigm is constantly more aromatic?
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think it always starts with the coffee, right? What coffee we're working with. Sometimes with the traditional technique, we don't necessarily can push certain volatiles to the level that we can see them and taste them. And we think that this particular coffee maybe does not have these flavors. Because these aroma volatiles are just below the threshold, we can't sense them, we can't taste them. But by having the opportunity to use Paragon, we have a potential to increase certain aroma volatile or combination of volatiles, so we can suddenly see new flavor.
Yeah, Yeah, and actually for espresso, as well as for filter coffee, and that's a statement from the people who taste it. They said if you let the coffee stand a little bit, the difference actually increases due to the cooling of the coffee. So I had a discussion with Mathieu, and he told me at the Sendri Summit, wait a minute before you give it to the people to taste, because I see a bigger difference after a minute. So the coffee had to a little bit wait if it's too hot, perhaps. The differences are not that strong, so it's not something that disappears. And I showed you the Sendri data that were done on the filter coffees. The one that had cooled down, the difference had shown more significant than sensory. For the analytical part, we didn't wait. We really measured straight away. So there is a lot we can do more, but it seems that waiting, I'm talking now about a minute or less or something like that, is more pronouncing the difference than losing it because of the difference in temperature probably, and probably also for the use of the capacity for people to taste differences better at a little bit cooler temperature. But try it.
Yeah. Yes.
When you said create new flavors, do you mean the flavors that was existing in the coffee, or is it just amplifying the current flavor? Like it's not creating new flavor, no?
It's actually both. Yeah, great question. Absolutely both. You know, one of the things that's often, you know, as Kelly was saying, you know, competing for doing competition, you know, ordering coffees from so many different roasters, and actually brewing with these coffees, and often we would, you know, brew coffee with honey at the back, and one would be chilled, extracted, one would be not. And you know, Hanny was wondering why are we getting these notes, these new different flavors. And some flavors we amplify them a little bit more, but sometimes you just get completely new flavor that you did not get from that coffee earlier. And you know, one of the most interesting things in Australian competition is that's actually we managed to bring new flavors that have not been extracted by the competitors. And that's, you know, that's combination of, you know, volatile compounds that we could not get with a common technique. And suddenly we push this aroma volatile or volatiles above the threshold, so we can suddenly start tasting them. And again, it's coffee by coffee. Really, that's not going to happen with every single coffee. You know, coffee, if it's lightly roasted and if it has that potential to be amazing, we manage to push it forward to sort of make it more desirable. But I do want to mention that we are learning as well. I'm personally finding a lot of differences in the tactile as well. Like for example, with some geisha coffees, by using chilling, like we found the tendency that coffee suddenly has a little bit less tannins, so it's improving your aftertaste and making it etc.
Yeah, but from a physical perspective, of course, you're right, we're not creating aroma chemically spoken. We're actually retaining flavor compounds, but then in the profile, you can actually sense new flavors just because of the change in balance. But physically, we're not creating aroma compounds, we're just retaining them. But that can be, you know, that could be then changing the whole profile, and you get a new perceived flavor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and often we would have coffee that, you know, has a lot of defects. We did not really want to extract chill that coffee with the technique because you just get so much more of them. And even if you have this kind of roasty coffees that are maybe a little bit darker, you will see that more obvious. And so it's not that, you know, high quality coffee, we feel it does some sort of improvement, and with every coffee is a little bit different. Sometimes new flavor, sometimes more of that same flavor that you tasted, but just a little bit more highlighted. And in the same thing, if there's a defect, it is more obvious. At least in my sensory experience so far with the filter coffees.
Sorry, please forgive me for being a little bit reductive, but
would it not make sense to freeze the vessel or chill the vessel instead of running the rocks? Is there somewhere you can find a compromise there?
Which vessel?
The vessel which you're brewing into?
Yes. This is, we discussed many things, so what you have to do is, you have to reduce the loss. So you have basically, the whole concept is based on the fact that you are losing flavor compounds from the spout into the, so the issue with filter coffee is that it stays actually quite long there, so the thing that is coming down is actually sitting there, and you actually can lose there. But you don't want to cool the whole filter, so ideally you would freeze thing, so that's what's happening in, there are actually, and that's why I said, the concept is actually known intuitively in the industry. So if you do ready-to-drink beverages, some companies just freeze or cool immediately the extract to preserve it for two reasons. To preserve the aroma, but also because the extract is very unstable. So you want also to reduce the chemical reaction. So it is actually done in the industry to cool the whole extract for instant coffee or for ready-to-drink beverages. In that case, we have many other options, so we're talking now about one realization, how to exploit this phenomenon. And you could cool your cup in which you do it in espresso, or your jar in the filter coffee. Absolutely.
Yeah, Kelly can talk more about this, but in 2017, he actually froze his espresso cups and ran coffee completely frozen. Back then we did not know, but I do remember when we were in the semi-finals, Kelly handed me his espresso cup and it was just most intense floral I've ever, could experience. I was given that cup by a head roaster, Sam Cora, and I literally just started yelling at Sam, why do you have perfume? Why did you wash your hands with this intense, soap? And then later on we found out actually it's coming from the coffee. We also did experiment a lot with the cups, what's the distance, how long a cup travels. Like I encourage all of you, make an espresso, place your cup just underneath the spout, and if you have a high brewed machine, have your cup all the way at the bottom, and taste the differences, because there will be differences. The great thing with cooling the cup here, we can intensify these aromas and flavors a lot, but when that cup is cold and we're running entire extraction, we believe it makes certain changes in texture and balance, etc. It can be positive or negative, but we found that we cannot really control chill extraction as well if we are extracting entire shot in the cold cup. And there's a traveling time that we are not losing about quite a few volatiles. But yeah, there's, he made super tasty espresso by using a very cold cups as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
You want to finish?
Thanks so much.